The hegemony's most advanced translation algorithms were having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Captain Olivia Cross sat in the strategic briefing room aboard the HSV Dominion, watching alien text scroll across her display screen in increasingly frantic patterns. The computer was trying to translate Supreme War Commander Kreck's lecture on proper military doctrine for developing species, but apparently human military terminology was breaking its linguistic matrices in real time. Error. Human phrase tactical flexibility does not compute with established doctrine parameters, the system announced, in a voice that suggested it was considering early retirement. Try adaptive strategy, Olivia suggested helpfully. Error. Human concept, adaptive strategy, contradicts fundamental military science. Supreme War Commander Krex, all 7 feet of armored reptilian superiority, gestured dismissively with one of his forearms. The translation difficulties are irrelevant. Primitive species lack the vocabulary for advanced tactical concepts. Right, Olivia said, settling back in her chair with the expression of someone preparing to be educated about subjects she couldn't possibly understand. Please, continue explaining war to me. The irony was completely lost on Krex, which was exactly how Olivia liked it. For the past 6 months, she had been serving as Earth's military observer aboard the Hegemony flagship, officially learning about civilized warfare from the galaxy's self-proclaimed masters of military science. Unofficially, she had been taking very detailed notes about everything the Hegemony did wrong, which turned out to be a surprisingly comprehensive list. As I was explaining, Krex continued, activating a holographic display that showed perfect battle formations. The Hegemony has perfected the art of warfare through 3,000 years of systematic development. Our tactical doctrine eliminates uncertainty, randomness, and the chaotic decision-making that characterizes primitive military thinking. By primitive military thinking, you mean human military thinking. Precisely. Humans fight like, what is your term, barbarians? Your species lacks the intellectual sophistication necessary for true strategic planning. Olivia made a note on her datapad. It was a very specific note about hegemony arrogance being a significant tactical vulnerability, but Krex interpreted her writing as proof of his excellent teaching. Consider this recent engagement, he said, pulling up footage of a hegemony victory over some unfortunate alien species. Perfect coordination. Mathematical precision. Each ship following predetermined protocols that guarantee optimal outcomes. Optimal for what? For victory, obviously. But what if the enemy doesn't follow your predetermined assumptions? Krex's scaled features arranged themselves into what his species considered a condescending smile. That's the beauty of superior tactical doctrine. When you control all variables, enemy behavior becomes predictable. All variables? Within acceptable parameters, yes. Olivia made another note. This one was about the hegemony's fundamental inability to plan for opponents who refuse to be predictable. But again, Krex saw it as evidence of her primitive curiosity. Perhaps, he suggested, you would benefit from understanding why human tactics are so inadequate. I'd love to hear your analysis. Krex activated another display, this one showing human military footage that the hegemony had somehow acquired. Olivia recognized the engagement. It was from the recent conflict with the Zentaray border states, where human forces had achieved victory through what military analysts politely termed unconventional methodology. Observe, Krex said, pointing to human ships moving in what appeared to be random patterns. No formation discipline, no coordinated strategy. They are essentially improvising everything. And they won through luck. Primitive tactics occasionally succeed through pure chance, but they cannot be consistently replicated. Interesting theory, Olivia said, making a third note. This one was about the hegemony's inability to distinguish between luck and tactical adaptation, but Krex remained blissfully unaware that his educational lecture was being turned into a detailed analysis of his species' strategic blindness. The fundamental problem with human warfare, Krex continued, warming to his favorite subject, is that you lack systematic thinking. Military science requires predictable inputs to generate reliable outputs. Humans treat warfare like art instead of science. Art. Creative expression. emotional responses, intuitive decision-making. These concepts have no place in proper military doctrine. But what if creative expression actually works better than systematic thinking? Krex made a sound that his translator rendered as condescending laughter. Impossible. 3,000 years of hegemony military development prove that systematic approaches are superior to chaotic improvisation. 3,000 years is a long time to do the same thing. Precisely. We have perfected warfare. Olivia looked at her datapad, which now contained approximately 47 specific observations about hegemony tactical doctrine, including detailed notes about their predictable formation patterns, their inability to adapt to unexpected situations, and their assumption that superior technology automatically guaranteed superior outcomes. She also had some very interesting ideas about how all of these weaknesses could be exploited, but she decided to keep those thoughts to herself for the moment. "Let me show you what real military doctrine looks like," Krex announced, pulling up the hegemony's complete tactical database. "These are the formations that have conquered 17 star systems and subjugated 43 different species." Olivia leaned forward with obvious interest, though not for the reasons Krex imagined. "Formation Alpha 7, he explained, displaying a beautiful pattern of ships moving in mathematical harmony. "Maximum firepower concentration with optimal defensive positioning. Impossible to counter if executed properly. What makes it impossible to counter? Mathematical certainty. Every possible enemy response has been calculated and accounted for. Every possible response? Within the parameters of rational tactical behavior, yes." Olivia made a note about the phrase, rational tactical behavior, and what it suggested about hegemony assumptions. Her growing list of observations was becoming quite comprehensive. "Formation Beta 3, Krex continued, showing another elegant tactical pattern. "Designed for fleet engagements against numerically superior forces. Note the precision timing required for optimal effectiveness. What happens if the timing gets disrupted? It doesn't. Hegemony crews train for years to execute these formations perfectly. But theoretically, if something unexpected happened, nothing unexpected happens if you plan properly." That statement went directly into Olivia's notes under dangerous assumptions about reality. "Formation Gamma 12, Krex said, displaying a defensive pattern that looked like crystalline artwork. "Absolute protection against conventional attack vectors. Mathematically unbreachable." Mathematically. Computer simulations have tested this formation against every known tactical approach. It has never been defeated. Every known approach? Correct. There are only so many ways to conduct military operations rationally. Olivia's pen moved quickly across her datapad as she recorded detailed observations about the hegemony's complete inability to imagine tactical approaches that hadn't been previously cataloged and studied. "Peace formations are beautiful," she said, and meant it. "Very elegant. Elegance and efficiency are hallmarks of superior military science. How long does it take to train crews to execute them properly?" "Approximately 4 standard years for basic proficiency, 8 to 10 years for formation leadership positions." "That's a significant investment. Quality requires time and dedication. And what happens if you lose experienced crews?" Krex paused, his scaled features showing the first hint of uncertainty. "That rarely happens. Hegemony formations are designed to minimize casualties, but if it did happen, replacement crews would require additional training time. How much additional time? Would depend on various factors." Olivia made a note about the hegemony's tactical doctrine being dependent on experienced personnel and their apparent lack of rapid replacement protocols. The list of potential vulnerabilities was getting quite long. "I'm curious about something," she said, looking up from her datapad with the innocent expression of someone asking about the weather. "How do these formations perform against opponents who don't use formations at all?" "All military forces use formations of some kind." "Do they?" "Organized warfare requires organizational structure. But what if someone decided to be disorganized?" Krex's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed this question. "Disorganized warfare is inefficient warfare. Inefficient maybe, but predictable. Disorganization is, by definition, unpredictable." "Right. So how do you calculate mathematical responses to unpredictable actions?" You don't encourage unpredictable actions. You impose order on chaotic situations. But what if the chaos fights back?" The Supreme War Commander Krex stared at Olivia for several long seconds. his advanced tactical mind apparently struggling with concepts that his 3,000 years of military doctrine hadn't prepared him for. That's not how warfare works, he said finally, isn't it? Perhaps, Krex said, regaining his composure. We should focus on more practical matters. Let me show you how proper military intelligence gathering works. He activated a new display showing detailed surveillance data about various alien species. Olivia noted that the information was extremely comprehensive, covering everything from military capabilities to cultural weaknesses. Intelligence is the foundation of military superiority, Krex explained. Know your enemy better than they know themselves, and victory becomes inevitable. Makes sense. How much intelligence do you have about humans? Sufficient for our purposes, which are understanding human tactical limitations and exploiting them when necessary. Olivia looked at her datapad, then back at Krex. Could I see your intelligence assessment of human military capability? That information is classified. Oh, come on. I'm just curious about how we measure up. Krex considered this request. Sharing classified intelligence with primitive species was technically against protocol, but the human seemed so genuinely interested in learning about her own species' inadequacies. Very well, he said, pulling up a file marked Earth, Military Assessment, Developing Threat Level. The report was exactly what Olivia had expected. Comprehensive, detailed, and completely wrong about almost everything important. According to our analysis, Krex said, human military doctrine is characterized by emotional decision-making, tactical improvisation, and an over-reliance on individual initiative rather than systematic coordination. That sounds about right. Human representatives make human forces unpredictable in the short term, but ultimately ineffective against organized opposition. Because improvisation cannot match preparation. Individual initiative cannot overcome systematic coordination. Emotional decisions cannot compete with logical analysis. Olivia read through the assessment while Krex continued his explanation. The report was remarkably thorough in documenting human tactical behaviors, but it consistently interpreted adaptive flexibility as primitive chaos and creative problem-solving, as inability to follow proper procedures. More importantly, the assessment made several assumptions about human psychology and decision-making that were not just wrong, but dangerously wrong from a strategic planning perspective. This is really detailed, she said. How did you gather all this information? Standard intelligence protocols. Observation, analysis, interrogation of captured personnel. Interrogation? When circumstances permit, yes. Olivia made a note that was significantly more detailed than her previous observations. This note included specific thoughts about what the hegemony's intelligence-gathering methods revealed about their understanding of human nature, and why those methods were likely to produce fundamentally flawed conclusions. Based on this assessment, Krex continued, Hegemony Command estimates that human forces could be neutralized with minimal resource expenditure if conflict became necessary. Neutralized how? Superior tactics deployed against predictable weaknesses. And those weaknesses are emotional volatility, inability to maintain formation discipline, tendency to make irrational decisions under pressure. Interesting, Olivia said, closing her datapad with a soft click. I've been taking notes during your lecture. Excellence. Education is the first step toward understanding your species' limitations. Actually, Olivia said, her expression shifting slightly. I've been taking notes about your species' limitations. Krex's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. I don't understand. I know, Olivia replied, pulling out a second datapad that had been recording everything for the past 6 months. That's kind of the point, but that wasn't the shocking part. Supreme War Commander Krex stared at Captain Olivia Cross for several long seconds, his reptilian brain struggling to process what she had just said. Around the briefing room, other hegemony officers began to shift nervously in their seats as the implications slowly sank in. What, exactly, Krex said carefully, have you been taking notes about? Olivia activated her datapad's holographic display, and suddenly the air above the briefing table filled with detailed tactical analyses, behavioral observations, and what appeared to be comprehensive psychological profiles of everyone in the room. Well, she said with the same helpful tone she'd been using all morning, let's start with Formation Alpha 7. You know, the one that's impossible to counter? The hologram shifted to show the hegemony's perfect mathematical formation, but now it was annotated with red warning indicators that highlighted 17 different tactical vulnerabilities. See, the thing about mathematical perfection is that it's predictable, and predictable formations have exploitable weaknesses. She pointed to several specific positions in the formation. These ships here are covering too much area with too little overlap. A fast attack on vectors 127, 205, and 340 would create cascading gaps that would collapse your entire defensive matrix. Crex's scaled features went several shades paler. Those are classified tactical assessments. Were classified, Olivia corrected. I've been watching your formations for 6 months. You use the same patterns, the same timing, the same responses to the same stimuli. It's like watching a very elaborate dance routine. Our tactical doctrine is based on proven effectiveness. Your tactical doctrine is based on fighting enemies who fight like you do. Olivia's display shifted to show behavioral analysis charts. But here's what's really interesting. You've been so focused on perfecting your own methods that you've never learned to adapt to opponents who don't use your methods. Commander Vexel, Kreck's tactical advisor, leaned forward with obvious concern. What do you mean? I mean, your entire military philosophy assumes that warfare follows certain rules: formation integrity, logical decision trees, predictable response patterns. Olivia pulled up another display showing hegemony command structure. But what happens when your opponent doesn't follow those rules? All civilized species follow tactical protocols. All civilized species follow your tactical protocols, Olivia interrupted. Which is different. You've created a military doctrine that's incredibly effective against other species who think like you do. The problem is, humans don't think like you do. The briefing room fell silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems, and what sounded suspiciously like several hegemony officers quietly hyperventilating. Let me show you something interesting, Olivia continued, pulling up linguistic analysis charts. Your language has 47 different words for tactical precision, and 63 terms for various types of mathematical formation integrity. Precision is important in military operations, Kreck said defensively. Absolutely, but you know how many words you have for improvisation? Improvisation is not 0. You have 0 words for improvisation. Your language literally cannot express the concept of making things up as you go along. Commander Vexel's 4 eyes widened in alarm. That's impossible, is it? Let me try something. Olivia switched to speaking in fluent hegemony military dialect. What came out of her mouth was a series of tactical concepts that made every universal translator in the room emit error messages. What? What did you just say? Craigs demanded. I described a tactical maneuver where you deliberately sacrifice formation integrity to achieve strategic flexibility through unpredictable repositioning based on real-time battlefield assessment and emotional intuition. Those words don't exactly. Your language can't handle tactical concepts that aren't based on predetermined doctrine, which means your thinking can't handle them either. Olivia's display shifted again, now showing detailed personality profiles of every hegemony officer she'd observed over the past 6 months. Commander Vexel, you always recommend the same defensive posture when facing numerical disadvantage. Admiral Korax consistently chooses formation modifications based on his previous successful engagements. Captain Torth makes tactical decisions by consulting 3 different protocol manuals and choosing the option with the highest mathematical probability of success. How could you possibly know? Because you're all incredibly consistent, which makes you incredibly predictable. Olivia's expression remained friendly, but her voice carried a new edge. Predictable opponents are easy opponents. I think, Kreck said slowly, we may have underestimated human observational capabilities. Oh, you definitely underestimated human observational capabilities, Olivia agreed cheerfully. But that's not the interesting part. She activated a new display that made every hegemony officer in the room suddenly remember urgent appointments elsewhere. The interesting part is this: classified security footage from the HSV Retribution, HSV Conquest, and HSV Domination. 3 separate incidents over the past 4 months where your ships encountered Technical difficulties. The holographic display showed 3 different hegemony vessels suffering what their official reports had classified as equipment malfunctions and navigation errors. In each case, the ships had been forced to abort their missions and return to base for extensive repairs. Those were mechanical failures, Commander Vexel said quickly. Where are they? Olivia zoomed in on specific details from each incident. Because, according to your own security logs, in each case, the malfunctions began approximately 30 seconds after I asked to tour your engineering sections. Coincidence? All 3 times? Mechanical systems are complex. Mechanical systems are complex, Olivia agreed, but they're not usually susceptible to humans asking innocent questions about their operational parameters. She pulled up detailed technical schematics that definitely weren't supposed to be in the hands of Earth's harmless military observer. For example, your primary power coupling on Deck 7 has a fascinating design flaw. If someone were to accidentally reverse the polarity on the secondary plasma flow while asking to see how the containment field generators work, the resulting feedback cascade would require a complete system restart. Supreme War Commander Krex felt his career prospects developing significant structural problems. How do you know about our power coupling design? I asked, very politely, while your engineers were showing me around and explaining how impossible it would be for anyone to sabotage a hegemony vessel. You sabotaged our ships. I demonstrated that your security protocols have some interesting gaps, Olivia corrected. There's a difference. What kind of gaps? Olivia's display shifted to show security camera footage from inside hegemony vessels. The timestamp showed her previous educational tours of ship systems. But now, the footage was annotated with tactical analysis that revealed exactly how she had identified and exploited dozens of critical vulnerabilities. Your security assumes that threats come from enemies, not from guests. Your engineers assume that anyone asking technical questions is genuinely curious about engineering. Your command staff assumes that humans are too primitive to understand advanced technology. Those are reasonable assumptions, are they? Because from what I observed, your advanced technology has some pretty basic design flaws. The security footage showed Olivia casually asking about backup power systems, emergency protocols, and fail-safe mechanisms, while hegemony personnel helpfully explained exactly how their most critical systems could be disrupted. Lieutenant Commander Thex actually gave me a detailed lecture on your navigation computer's vulnerability to electromagnetic interference, she noted. He seemed very proud of how they'd solved that problem by installing additional shielding. The additional shielding works perfectly, unless someone introduces interference from inside the shielding perimeter, which is surprisingly easy to do if you know where the sensor nodes are located. How could you possibly? Lieutenant Commander Thex drew me a diagram. Commander Vexhall made a sound like a deflating atmospheric processor. He drew you a diagram of our classified defensive systems? He was being educational, very thorough. I learned a lot. Supreme War Commander Krex looked at the security footage, showing his own officers enthusiastically explaining their ship's most critical vulnerabilities to someone they assumed was a harmless primitive. This is impossible, he said weakly. No, this is Tuesday, Olivia replied. The impossible stuff happened on Wednesday. Wednesday? Krex asked, though his voice suggested he really didn't want to know the answer. The Zentari border incident, Olivia said, pulling up classified military footage that definitely wasn't supposed to exist. You know, the one where a human diplomatic courier somehow convinced an entire hegemony battle fleet to stand down? This was a negotiated ceasefire. That was a tactical demonstration, Olivia corrected, activating footage that showed a very different version of events than what appeared in official reports. The holographic display revealed security camera footage from the HSV Supremacy, the hegemony flagship that had been conducting routine patrol operations in disputed Zentari space. The timestamp showed the moment when a single human transport vessel had approached the fleet and requested permission to deliver diplomatic correspondence. Captain Cross to Hegemony Fleet Command, came a familiar voice from the recording. Permission to come aboard for official diplomatic business? That's your voice, Commander Vexhall observed unnecessarily. I was delivering mail, Olivia said with a shrug. Very important mail. The footage showed her arriving aboard the Hegemony fleet ship carrying what appeared to be a standard diplomatic pouch. But the security cameras had also recorded her casual conversations with hegemony personnel, and those conversations revealed something much more significant than mail delivery. "You know," her recorded voice said to the ship's tactical officer, "I couldn't help but notice that your fleet formation has some interesting characteristics." "Our formations are classified information," the tactical officer replied. "Oh, I'm not asking about classified information. I'm just observing that Formation Beta 7 creates some fascinating tactical opportunities." "What kind of opportunities?" "Well, if someone were to approach from Vector 90 at precisely the moment when your lead destroyers execute their scanning pattern rotation, they could achieve tactical superiority over your entire fleet, using nothing but optimal positioning and good timing." The hegemony tactical officer had laughed at this suggestion. "Impossible. Our formations account for all possible attack vectors, all possible vectors that follow traditional tactical doctrine," Olivia had agreed. "But what about vectors that don't follow traditional doctrine, such as?" "Oh, I don't know. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to ignore your formation entirely and just position themselves in the one spot where your weapons can't target them, while their weapons can target all of you, there is no such position, isn't there?" The security footage showed Olivia pulling out a datapad and displaying a tactical analysis that made the hegemony officer's face go through several distinct color changes. "This position," she had said, pointing to a specific coordinate in space, "offers direct line of sight to your command vessel, your primary weapons platforms, and your communication array, while remaining outside the engagement envelope of your defensive systems. That's not possible. Want to bet?" The footage then showed what happened next. Olivia's transport vessel moving to precisely the coordinates she had identified, while the hegemony fleet discovered that their most advanced tactical formation had a glaring blind spot that apparently no one had noticed in 3,000 years of military development. Supreme War Commander Krex watched his species' perfect tactical doctrine get systematically dismantled by someone who had learned it in 6 months, and immediately identified weaknesses that had gone unnoticed for millennia. "You turned our own formations against us," he said quietly. "I pointed out that your formations assume your enemies will cooperate with your tactical expectations," Olivia corrected. "When they don't cooperate, interesting things happen." The fleet surrendered to a single transport vessel. The fleet recognized that continuing the engagement would result in their complete destruction, with zero probability of inflicting reciprocal damage. "Oh, mathematics," Olivia said with a smile. "You taught me to appreciate the beauty of mathematical certainty in tactical planning." Commander Vexel stared at the tactical display showing how one human transport had achieved perfect strategic positioning against an entire hegemony battle fleet. "This is why humans are dangerous," he whispered. "No," Olivia said, her expression becoming more serious. "This is why underestimating humans is dangerous." She deactivated the holographic display and looked directly at Supreme War Commander Krex. "You spent 6 months teaching me about hegemony military doctrine, tactical philosophy, and strategic thinking. You showed me your formations, explained your decision-making processes, and demonstrated your technological capabilities. We were educating you about civilized warfare. You were giving me a comprehensive intelligence briefing about your species' military vulnerabilities. That's not. We were sharing knowledge. You were sharing weaknesses," Olivia corrected. "Every formation you showed me revealed tactical limitations. Every principle you explained highlighted strategic assumptions. Every technology you demonstrated exposed potential failure points." She pulled up her complete notes from 6 months of observation, hundreds of pages documenting hegemony military capabilities, behavioral patterns, and exploitable vulnerabilities. "This isn't educational material," Krex said, his voice hollow with realization. "This is a complete tactical analysis of how to defeat the hegemony military using their own doctrine against them," Olivia finished. "Yes, you've been studying us like laboratory specimens. I've been studying you like a species that might eventually become hostile to humanity." "We're not hostile to humanity." "You're not hostile to humanity yet," Olivia corrected. "But your intelligence assessment of human military capability suggests you've been planning for eventual conflict." She activated one final display showing the hegemony's classified strategic planning documents that outlined potential military scenarios involving Earth. "Sir, I thought it might be useful to have some strategic planning documents of my own." The classified footage that appeared on the briefing room's main display was marked with security warnings that made several hegemony officers reach instinctively for their sidearms. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, during what official records listed as routine training exercise Epsilon 7 in the Outer Rim. "This footage is beyond your clearance level," Commander Vexel protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Is it?" Captain Olivia Cross activated her personal authorization codes, and the display confirmed that she somehow possessed access credentials that shouldn't exist. "Because according to your own security protocols, I was granted observer status for all military operations conducted during my stay." Supreme War Commander Kreck studied the authorization display with growing horror. "Those codes, those are command-level clearances. Admiral Korax thought I should have comprehensive access to your training procedures, for educational purposes. Admiral Korax doesn't have the authority to grant, doesn't he?" Olivia pulled up a communication log showing her request for expanded access and the Admiral's enthusiastic approval. He seemed very eager to demonstrate hegemony tactical superiority. He said watching your exercises would help me understand why human military thinking is so limited. The security footage began playing, showing the HSV Dominion approaching a massive hegemony training exercise involving 17 ships conducting advanced formation maneuvers. What should have been a routine demonstration of military precision had somehow become something else entirely. "Training Fleet Alpha, this is HSV Dominion requesting permission to observe exercises," came Olivia's voice from the recording. "Permission granted, Dominion. Maintain safe distance and observe proper protocols." "Copy that. Just to confirm, this is a live-fire exercise using actual tactical doctrine?" "Affirmative. You'll be witnessing authentic hegemony fleet coordination." "Excellent. I have some questions about optimal tactical positioning." Commander Vexel paused the playback. "Questions about what?" "Well," Olivia said, settling back in her chair with obvious satisfaction, "I'd been studying your tactical manuals and I noticed some interesting discrepancies between theoretical doctrine and practical application." "Who kind of discrepancy?" "The kind that turned training exercises into learning experiences." She reactivated the playback, and the footage showed the ASV Dominion moving into what appeared to be a standard observation position, but the ship's trajectory was subtly wrong. Instead of maintaining safe distance, it was gradually positioning itself in a location that would become tactically significant as the exercise progressed. "Dominion, adjust your position to maintain proper separation from the exercise area," came the voice of the training fleet commander. "Copy that. Adjusting position. Quick question, though. Is Formation Delta 9 supposed to create that level of crossfire exposure on your lead destroyer?" "What crossfire exposure?" "Well, from my current position, I can see that your lead destroyer is positioned where it could potentially take fire from 3 of your own ships if they were to engage targets along vectors 120, 240, and 330. There was a long pause in the communication before the training commander responded. "That's impossible. Formation Delta 9 has been tested extensively." "I'm sure it has, but could you run a quick simulation just to check?" The footage showed the hegemony training fleet executing their maneuvers with mathematical precision, but as they moved into the formation positions that Olivia had identified, the tactical computers began displaying warning indicators. "This is Training Fleet Alpha to all vessels. Abort current formation. Repeat, abort Delta 9 and return to safe spacing." "Problem?" Olivia's voice inquired innocently. "Temporary tactical adjustment. Continue observation from your current position." "Actually," she said, "since I'm here, could I ask about Formation Gamma 15? I noticed something interesting in the manual." Supreme War Commander Kreck stopped the playback and stared at Olivia. "You studied our classified tactical manuals?" "Admiral Korax insisted I have complete access to understand hegemony doctrine. He was very thorough. Those manuals contain 3,000 years of military development. And about 37 significant tactical flaws," Olivia interrupted. "Maybe more. I only had 6 months to review them." She restarted the footage, which now showed the training fleet attempting to execute Formation Gamma 15, while Olivia provided helpful commentary about weapon firing arcs, defensive positioning, and what she cheerfully described as optimal target acquisition opportunities for hostile forces. "You know," her voice continued from the recording, "if I were planning to attack this formation, I'd probably approach from Vector 75, Wait for your screening vessels to execute their patrol pattern rotation. Then target your command vessel during the 14-second window when your defensive matrix has that interesting gap. There is no gap in formation Gamma 15, the training commander had replied with obvious irritation. Isn't there? Could you maybe test that hypothesis? The footage showed what happened next. The training fleet's own simulated enemy forces, following Olivia's suggested approach vector, achieved complete tactical surprise and theoretical destruction of the command vessel in exactly 14 seconds. How did you identify that vulnerability? The training commander demanded. I read your manual. It's right there in Section 15, subsection C. The formation assumes that enemies will approach from predetermined vectors using standard attack profiles. Standard attack profiles work? Standard attack profiles work against enemies who use standard defense profiles, Olivia had corrected. But what happens when your enemy doesn't use standard profiles? The training exercise had rapidly devolved into what could only be described as an educational disaster, with Olivia systematically identifying weaknesses in formation after formation, while increasingly frustrated hegemony commanders discovered that their perfect tactical doctrine had more holes than a piece of decorative lacework. She turned our own training exercise into a comprehensive demonstration of our tactical inadequacies, Commander Vexel said weakly. It gets better, Olivia announced, advancing the footage to show the exercise's conclusion. This is the part where Admiral Korax decided to demonstrate superior hegemony tactical thinking by engaging in actual combat maneuvers. Actual combat? Well, simulated actual combat. He wanted to prove that live engagement would eliminate the theoretical vulnerabilities I'd identified. The footage showed the HSV Dominion suddenly finding itself designated as a hostile target by the training fleet, with Admiral Korax personally commending an attack designed to demonstrate the effectiveness of hegemony doctrine against primitive human tactics. Dominion, you are now designated as hostile. Prepare to be engaged by superior tactical doctrine, Admiral Korax had announced with obvious satisfaction. Copy that. Should I fight back, or just let you demonstrate superior doctrine? Use whatever primitive tactics you think might work. Roger. Implementing primitive tactics. What happened next had apparently required the training fleet's after-action computers to invent new categories of tactical analysis. Failure. The HSV Dominion began moving in patterns that violated every principle of formation fighting, defensive positioning, and logical engagement doctrine. Instead of trying to outfight the superior hegemony force, Olivia had simply positioned her ship in locations where the hegemony fleet couldn't effectively target her, while she could systematically disable their vessels, using tactics that weren't in any manual. She's not fighting, Admiral Korax had protested. She's just moving around. I'm implementing adaptive positioning based on real-time tactical assessment, Olivia had replied. Also known as not being where you're shooting. That's not a valid tactical approach. Why not? Because it doesn't follow proper engagement protocols. Whose protocols? The footage showed the HSV Dominion somehow achieving tactical superiority over an entire hegemony training fleet by consistently being in positions that the fleet's doctrine hadn't accounted for, using weapons in ways that their defensive systems hadn't anticipated, and generally treating the engagement like a three-dimensional puzzle rather than a formal military exercise. This is impossible, Admiral Korax had declared as his flagship's systems began displaying damage indicators that suggested imminent mission failure. This is Tuesday, Olivia had replied cheerfully. On Wednesday, I'll show you something really impressive. The exercise had ended with the complete theoretical destruction of the hegemony training fleet, and Admiral Korax requesting immediate tactical analysis to understand how 17 ships with superior technology and 3,000 years of tactical development had been defeated by one human who had apparently been making up her strategy in real time. According to our analysis, the fleet's tactical computer had reported, the hostile vessel employed tactical methodologies that do not exist in our combat databases. Methodologies that don't exist? Admiral Korax had demanded. The hostile vessel appears to have invented new tactical approaches during the engagement. You can't invent tactics during combat. The hostile vessel disagrees. Supreme War Commander Krex turned off the footage and sat in stunned silence for several long minutes before finding his voice. You defeated an entire fleet using tactics you invented during the battle. I defeated an entire fleet using tactics that your doctrine couldn't counter because your doctrine assumes that enemies will fight the way you expect them to fight, Olivia corrected. When they don't, your formations become tactical liabilities instead of tactical advantages. Representative has arrived, but how could you possibly? I spent 6 months studying your doctrine, your formations, your decision-making processes, and your tactical assumptions, she said patiently. Once I understood how you think about warfare, it became relatively simple to think about warfare differently. This is beyond advanced tactical thinking, Commander Vexel said, scrolling through analysis data that the fleet computers had generated after the exercise. This is what happens when you teach military doctrine to someone who isn't limited by military doctrine, Olivia finished. You showed me your formations, I figured out how to beat them. You explained your strategies, I developed counter-strategies. You demonstrated your technological advantages, I found ways to make them irrelevant. In 6 months? Your doctrine is very comprehensive. It was educational. Krex looked at the tactical analysis, showing how every hegemony formation could be systematically defeated using approaches that their military doctrine had never anticipated. This isn't just tactical innovation, he said slowly. This is complete tactical revolution. This is what military thinking looks like, when it's not constrained by 3,000 years of doing the same things the same way, Olivia replied. You've spent so long perfecting your doctrine that you forgot doctrine is supposed to adapt to new threats, not the other way around. But we are the threat, Commander Vexel protested. We have the superior technology, the advanced formations, the mathematical precision. You have superior technology designed to fight enemies who fight like you, Olivia interrupted. Advanced formations that work against opponents who use formations. Mathematical precision that assumes mathematical opponents. She activated her datapad one final time, displaying a comprehensive analysis that made every hegemony officer in the room suddenly understand why their careers might require significant revision. The problem with being the galaxy's premier military force, she said, is that everyone you fight has to adapt to fighting you. But you never have to adapt to fighting anyone else. What does that mean? It means you've become really, really good at fighting the same way for 3,000 years, but you've forgotten how to fight differently. And humans know how to fight differently? Humans know how to fight however the situation requires, Olivia said. We adapt, you optimize. What's the difference? Optimization makes you perfect at doing one thing. Adaptation makes you capable of doing anything. The briefing room fell silent as the assembled hegemony officers processed the implications of discovering that their species' military supremacy was based on assumptions that had just been systematically demolished by someone who learned their doctrine as a hobby. Sir, Krex said finally, what happens now? Olivia smiled, and it was the kind of smile that suggested the conversation was about to become even more interesting. Now, she said, I show you what humans do when we're actually trying. The sound of 500 billion aliens realizing they made a mistake had apparently traveled faster than light. The emergency session of the Galactic Military Council convened exactly 47 hours after Captain Olivia Cross's comprehensive dismantling of hegemony tactical doctrine became the worst-kept secret in civilized space. Representatives from 32 different military organizations sat around a table designed for formal diplomatic negotiations. But the atmosphere felt more like a support group for beings whose professional confidence had been systematically demolished by educational outreach. Fleet Admiral Terran of the Zephyrian Empire activated the session's recording protocols with the resignation of someone documenting the end of an era. We're here, he announced, to address what our intelligence analysts have classified as a paradigm extinction event in galactic military doctrine. Paradigm extinction, asked Marshal Corvin from the Allied Defense Network, when a fundamental assumption about reality proves so catastrophically wrong that entire fields of expertise become obsolete overnight. Supreme War Commander Krex, still recovering from having his species' 3,000-year military tradition reduced to a case study in tactical inadequacy, activated his presentation systems with hands that shook slightly. The situation, he began, is that everything we thought we knew about human military capability was apparently designed to make us feel better about our own limitations. Meaning that when humans told us they were primitive, they meant not constrained by our assumptions about what's possible. When they said they lacked sophisticated doctrine, they meant not limited by rigid thinking. When they described their tactics as improvised, they meant infinitely adaptable. The assembled military leaders absorbed this information with the collective enthusiasm of professional warriors discovering that their entire careers had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how warfare actually worked. "How bad is it?" Fleet Admiral Terran asked with the voice of someone who really didn't want to know the answer. Krex activated a holographic display showing tactical analyses from 17 different engagements where human forces had encountered superior alien military doctrine. "Every engagement resulted in human victory," he reported. "Not through superior technology, not through numerical advantage, but through tactical approaches that made our military doctrine irrelevant." Irrelevant how? They don't fight our wars. They fight their wars, and apparently, their wars have different rules. Marshal Corvin studied the tactical data with professional horror. "These engagement reports. Humans seem to treat our formations like tactical obstacles rather than tactical threats. Because from their perspective, formations are tactical obstacles," Krex explained. "We see formations as force multipliers. Humans see formations as large, slow-moving targets with predictable behavior patterns. But formations are the foundation of military science. Formations are the foundation of our military science," corrected Admiral Vexana from the Strategic Analysis Division. "Human military science appears to be based on making our military science irrelevant." She activated her own display showing comparative analyses of human and alien tactical methodologies. "We base our tactics on controlling variables. Humans base their tactics on exploiting the fact that we try to control variables." Explain. "We create perfect formations that work optimally under specific conditions. Humans create imperfect conditions that make perfect formations work suboptimally. That's not how military science works. It's not how our military science works. But it's exactly how human military science works." Fleet Admiral Terran felt his understanding of warfare developing significant structural problems. "Are you saying that human tactical doctrine is specifically designed to counter advanced military thinking?" "I'm saying that human tactical doctrine doesn't counter advanced military thinking," Admiral Vexana replied. "It ignores advanced military thinking and does something else entirely." "What does it do?" "It wins." The council chamber fell silent except for the sound of 32 different military traditions, simultaneously questioning their fundamental assumptions about organized violence. "Recommendations?" Fleet Admiral Terran asked weakly. "Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha," Krex announced. "Immediate revision of all diplomatic engagement procedures involving human military personnel." "What does Protocol 77 Alpha entail?" "The assumption that humans possess comprehensive intelligence about your military capabilities, regardless of their apparent status, clearance level, or stated mission objectives." "That seems extreme." "Captain Cross learned our complete tactical doctrine in 6 months, and immediately identified vulnerabilities that our own strategists hadn't noticed in 3,000 years of development," Krex replied. "Extreme circumstances require extreme protocols." The revised Galactic Military Engagement Standards were published 3 weeks later under the emergency classification Essential Survival Information for Professional Military Personnel. The document opened with a warning in 17 different languages that roughly translated to, "If you are about to explain warfare to humans, please reconsider your life choices." Article 1 established that humans should be assumed to possess advanced tactical knowledge regardless of their apparent experience level, training background, or stated familiarity with alien military doctrine. Article 2 required that all classified military information be treated as potentially compromised. If any human had expressed innocent curiosity about related topics within the previous 6 months, Article 3 mandated immediate tactical doctrine review if human observers had been granted access to military exercises, training programs, or strategic planning sessions. Article 4, which was added after someone pointed out that humans seemed to learn military doctrine faster than most species could teach it, simply stated, Educational outreach programs involving human participants should include provisions for becoming the student rather than the instructor. The standards were distributed to every major military organization in the galaxy, along with a comprehensive case study titled How Captain Cross Accidentally Revolutionized Galactic Warfare by Asking Questions. The case study became required reading at military academies across 17 star systems, though most instructors were careful to present it as a cautionary tale about information security, rather than an instruction manual for tactical innovation. The fundamental lesson, wrote Admiral Vexana in her introduction to the case study, is that humans don't just learn your military doctrine, they improve it, and then they use the improved version against you. 6 months after the Great Tactical Revelation, as military historians would later call it, the first human military exchange program was quietly established by the Galactic Defense Consortium. The program's stated goal was enhanced tactical coordination through cross-species military education, but its actual purpose was ensuring that human tactical innovations benefited galactic civilization, rather than making galactic civilization irrelevant. Captain Olivia Cross was appointed as the program's first director, a position that came with diplomatic immunity, unlimited access to military facilities, and what amounted to a blank check for educational activities. Her first initiative was a series of tactical seminars titled Adaptive Doctrine for Static Thinkers, which became so popular that enrollment had to be limited to prevent entire alien military establishments from simultaneously requesting transfers to learn the human way of war. The goal isn't to replace your tactical doctrine, she explained to her first class of alien military officers. The goal is to teach you that tactical doctrine is a tool, not a religion. But our doctrine has been tested and proven effective, protested Colonel Vortak of the Hegemony Strategic Command. Effective against enemies who use similar doctrine, Olivia agreed. But what happens when you encounter enemies who don't use your doctrine? We adapt our doctrine to counter their approach. And if they adapt their approach to counter your adaptation, we develop new adaptations, right? So why not skip the middle step and just teach your forces to adapt in real time, instead of waiting for doctrine updates? Colonel Vortak stared at her with the expression of someone whose understanding of military organization was undergoing emergency reconstruction. You're suggesting that individual soldiers should be capable of tactical innovation during combat? I'm suggesting that individual soldiers should be capable of thinking during combat. But that would eliminate the need for centralized tactical planning. Would it? Or would it make centralized tactical planning more effective because it's supported by distributed tactical thinking? The colonel's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the concept of military doctrine that empowered subordinates to think creatively, rather than requiring them to follow predetermined procedures. That's not how military organizations work. It's not how your military organizations work, Olivia corrected. But it's exactly how human military organizations work. And human military organizations are effective? Human military organizations don't get systematically outmaneuvered by enemies who spent 6 months studying their tactical manuals. Colonel Vortak felt his career in military planning developing some interesting new possibilities. The program's success led to the establishment of human tactical advisory positions in military organizations across the galaxy. Within 2 years, the phrase, "What would a human do?" became standard protocol for tactical planning sessions that encountered unexpected situations. The results were immediately apparent. Alien military forces that incorporated human-style adaptive thinking began achieving tactical success rates that their previous doctrine-based approaches had never imagined possible. Humans didn't teach us new tactics, Admiral Corax wrote in his memoir. The revolution I accidentally started by being condescending. They taught us how to think about tactics differently. The difference, he continued, is that tactics are specific solutions to specific problems. Thinking about tactics is a general solution to any problem. Before human influence, our military doctrine was like a very advanced cookbook with precise recipes for every possible dish. After human influence, our military doctrine became like teaching people how to cook. The cookbook approach works perfectly if your enemies only order dishes that are in your cookbook. The cooking approach works regardless of what your enemies order, because you can adapt your ingredients and methods to create whatever response the situation requires. Supreme War Commander Krex, who had been promoted to Director of Adaptive Military Studies, put it more succinctly. We learn to stop asking, what does doctrine say we should do? And start asking, what do we need to accomplish? The transformation was so complete that within 5 years, alien military academies were teaching courses in human-style military thinking as core curriculum rather than specialized electives. The greatest irony, Captain Cross observed during her farewell address as program director, is that you already knew how to think adaptively. You just convinced yourselves that it wasn't professional. Humans didn't bring you new knowledge. We gave you permission to use knowledge you already had. The only difference between human tactical thinking and alien tactical thinking is that humans never assumed there was only one right way to solve a problem. She paused, looking out at an audience of alien military officers whose careers had been fundamentally transformed by learning to question their own assumptions. You taught me your doctrine, and I learned it perfectly. But I also learned that doctrine is supposed to serve you, not the other way around. The moment you start serving your doctrine instead of making your doctrine serve you, you stop being a military force and start being a very expensive reenactment society. Don't be a reenactment society, be a military force. As she concluded her address and prepared to return to Earth, the assembled alien officers rose in a gesture of respect that transcended species boundaries. They had come to teach humanity about warfare. Instead, humanity had taught them how to think. The universe would never be quite the same, and for the first time in galactic history, that was exactly what everyone wanted.